History remembers him as a great king, a man who rose from nothing, who earned respect, who carried faith like a banner and wore it without shame. But that is not where this story begins, because the truth is, the moment that defined him did not happen in a battlefield. It did not happen when he stood before giants. It happened in silence, on a quiet rooftop, when no one was watching and nothing seemed at stake. A moment so small it could have passed unnoticed, and yet it changed everything. Because that night, standing alone above a sleeping city, he saw something he was never meant to see. And in that instant, a decision formed, not loud, not forced, just a quiet choice that could have ended there, but it didn't. And what followed was not just a mistake, it was a chain of decisions that would cost a man his life and follow a king for the rest of his days. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. David was not an ordinary man, and that is what makes this story difficult to ignore, because everything about his life pointed in one direction: discipline, faith, purpose, a man trusted with power, a man people believed in, a man who had already proven who he was long before this night ever came. And yet, somewhere between who he had been and who he had become, something shifted, and at the center of it all stood Bathsheba, not as a villain, not as a plan, but as a moment that should have passed. And then there was Uriah, a man defined by loyalty, a man who did everything right, the kind of man any leader would trust without question, the kind of man who never saw what was coming. And that is where the questions begin, not with answers, but with tension, because was this truly a moment of weakness, something sudden and isolated, or was it a decision that was allowed to grow step by step without being stopped? Did power slowly change David in ways no one noticed, or did it simply reveal something that had always been there? And more importantly, why didn't it end when it should have ended? Why did one decision lead to another and another, until the consequences could no longer be contained? Because this is not just a story about what happened. It is a story about how far a man can go before he realizes he has gone too far. Before that night ever happened, before Bathsheba, before Uriah, before the questions, there was a different version of David, a man who did not begin with power but with responsibility, a shepherd watching over what was placed in his care, learning patience, learning discipline, learning how to stand alone when no one was watching. And those quiet years shaped him in ways that would later define his rise. Because when the moment came and fear held everyone else back, David stepped forward, not because he had the advantage, but because he believed. And when he faced a giant that no one else dared to face, it was not strength that set him apart. It was conviction, the kind that does not wait for approval, the kind that acts. And that moment changed everything, not just for him, but for how people saw him. Because from that point forward, David was no longer just a shepherd. He became a warrior, then a leader, and eventually a king. But none of it was handed to him. None of it was given without cost. He wasn't given power. He earned it, step by step, decision by decision. And through it all, there was something deeper that defined him, something beyond position or reputation. He was known for his loyalty, for his courage, for his devotion, a man who turned to God not only in victory, but in uncertainty, a man who understood that leadership was not just about authority, but about alignment. And for that, he was called a man after God's own heart, not because he was perfect, but because he was committed. And yet, even a man like that is still human, still capable of slowing down, still capable of becoming comfortable. And that is where the shift begins, not in a moment of failure, but in a moment of ease, because there comes a point where the battles are no longer constant, where the pressure fades, where routine replaces urgency, and slowly, without announcement, discipline can weaken. And that is what makes the next moment so important, because at a time when kings were expected to lead, when they were expected to be present, when they were expected to remain engaged, something changed, and the decision seemed small, almost unimportant, but it set everything else in motion. Kings were at war, but David stayed behind. That night did not arrive with warning. It came quietly, the way most turning points do, without noise, without urgency, just a man alone with his thoughts, standing above a city that trusted him. And for a moment, everything felt still, nothing pressing, nothing demanding his attention, until his focus shifted, not toward duty, not toward responsibility, but toward something unexpected. And that is when he saw her, Bathsheba, not as part of a plan, not as something he had been searching for. Just a moment that appeared and could have disappeared just as quickly, but it didn't, because instead of turning away, David stayed. And in that stillness, a decision began to form, not forced, not rushed, just allowed. He asked about her, and the answer was clear. She was married, and not just to anyone, but to Uriah, a man who was away, a man serving faithfully, a man doing exactly what David himself was expected to be doing. And that should have been the end of it. That should have been enough to close the door before it fully opened. But it wasn't, he knew, and he still sent for her. And in that moment, everything changed, because what followed was no longer accidental. It became intentional, a private act that did not stay private for long, because soon after, the message came, simple, direct, unavoidable. Bathsheba was pregnant, and just like that, what had been hidden became something that demanded action, something that could not be ignored. And that is where the tension rises, because instead of stepping forward with truth, David chose another path, one that required planning, one that required control. He sent for Uriah, calling him back from the battlefield under the appearance of concern. And when Uriah arrived, the expectation was simple: go home, rest, return to normal life. Let the situation resolve itself quietly. But Uriah did not respond the way David expected. He refused to go home. He refused comfort, choosing instead to remain aligned with the men, still fighting, still risking their lives. His reasoning was direct. How could he rest while others could not? How could he step into peace while they remained in battle? And in that moment, the contrast became clear. Uriah stood in honor, steady, consistent, unshaken, while David stood in compromise, adjusting, managing, trying to control something that was already moving beyond him. And the more Uriah held his ground, the more complicated the situation became, because the plan depended on him doing what was expected. And when he didn't, it forced David to think again, to act again, to go further than he had already gone. And that is where the shift deepens, because now the question is no longer about covering a mistake. It becomes about removing an obstacle. And that is when everything takes another step forward, a step that cannot be undone. Because when one decision leads to another, it becomes harder to stop, harder to turn back. And so David made a second decision. The second decision did not come with hesitation. It came with clarity, the kind that forms when a man has already crossed one line and convinces himself that crossing another will fix what has already been done. And so David wrote the letter, not in anger, not in panic, but with intention, sealing it, placing it into the hands of the one man who trusted him without question, Uriah, a soldier who had proven his loyalty, a man who would carry out any instruction given to him. And that is what makes this moment so heavy, because Uriah did not question what he was holding. He did not open it. He did not suspect it. He carried it as any loyal man would, with trust, with obedience, with confidence in the authority that gave it to him. And in doing so, he carried his own death sentence without knowing it. And once he returned to the battlefield, the plan moved forward exactly as written. Orders were given, positioning was arranged, and at the right moment, support was withdrawn, leaving Uriah exposed, isolated in the very place he had once stood with strength. And in the chaos of war, where commands are followed and outcomes are accepted, the result came quickly. Uriah fell, not because he failed, not because he lacked courage, but because a decision had already been made long before the battle reached him. And when the report returned to David, it did not come with accusation, it came as news. Another loss in war, another soldier gone, and on the surface, everything appeared to settle. The problem had been removed, the situation reshaped, and David moved forward, bringing Bathsheba into his house, taking her as his wife, providing a new beginning that, from the outside, looked complete, controlled, resolved, and for a moment, it seemed convincing. It looked like everything was under control. But there is a difference between what appears settled and what is actually finished. Because truth does not disappear when it is hidden, and actions do not lose their weight simply because they are covered well. And while everything may have looked stable within the walls of the palace, there was something beyond those walls that had not shifted, something that had seen every step, every decision, every attempt to manage what had been done. And that is where the story turns. Because while David believed the situation had been contained, heaven had not looked away. The moment of control did not last, because truth does not wait for permission. It arrives when it must, and when it did not come through noise or force. It came through a man who did not need either. Nathan, calm, steady, and direct, walking into the same space where decisions had been made and silence had been trusted. And he did not begin with accusation. He began with a story, simple, clear, almost ordinary, about a man who had more than enough, and another who had very little. A man who could take from his own without loss, yet chose instead to take from the one who had almost nothing, removing what was not his, disregarding the cost, choosing convenience over what was right. And as Nathan spoke, David listened, not as someone being confronted, but as a king hearing a case, a leader responsible for judgment, for fairness, for making decisions that reflect justice. And when the story reached its end, David reacted without hesitation, anger rising quickly, his response strong, decisive. He declared that the man in the story deserved consequence, that such actions could not be ignored, that justice must be served. And in that moment, he believed he was speaking about someone else. Then everything stopped. No movement, no explanation, just a single statement delivered without force, without delay. You are the man. And in that silence, everything shifted. Because those words did not require interpretation, they did not need to be expanded, they connected every decision, every action, every attempt to hide what had been done, and there was nothing left to argue, nothing left to defend, because the same standard David had just used to judge another now stood directly before him, applied to him. And in that moment, the king judged himself. What followed did not arrive all at once. It unfolded in ways that could not be reversed, because truth does not erase consequences, it reveals them. And for David, the cost moved beyond the private and into the visible, into his home, into his future. The child that came from that night did not survive, and the loss carried a weight no position could shield him from. It was not something he could command away or manage. It was something he had to face, and it did not end there, because the stability of his household began to shift, tension where there had once been unity, conflict rising from within, moments that would challenge him not as a king, but as a father, as a man. And over time, the ripple effects became clear. This was not contained. This was not isolated. This was not just a private failure. It became a public consequence. And yet, in the middle of that weight, there was a response that defined what remained of his story. David did not deny what he had done. He did not shift blame. He did not attempt to rebuild his image through appearances. He faced it fully, honestly. And from that place, he turned back to the very foundation he had once stood on, seeking forgiveness not as a formality, but as a necessity, expressing what could not be undone, acknowledging what could not be hidden, writing from his lowest point, not as a king, but as a man who understood the cost of his own decisions. And that is where the deeper message begins to settle, because failure does not end a life. but it changes it. It leaves marks, it leaves reminders, and for David, those reminders stayed, not to destroy him, but to shape what remained. And in the end, the truth is simple. Power didn't destroy him. Silence did. One unchecked decision did. And so the story of David does not end with victory, and it does not end with failure. It settles somewhere in between, in a place that feels closer to reality than either extreme, because what makes his story stay with you is not just what happened, but what it reveals about decisions, about timing, about the quiet moments that seem small until they are not. A man can rise from nothing, build a life marked by strength and faith, carry responsibility well, and still face a moment where everything depends on what he chooses next. And when that moment comes, it does not announce itself. It does not warn you. It arrives quietly, the way it did that night. And what you do in that silence matters more than anything done in the open. And that is why this story continues to raise questions long after it ends. Was David's punishment too harsh, or not enough? Would you have made a different choice? These are not easy questions, because it is always easier to judge from a distance. Easier to see clearly when the outcome is already known. But in the moment itself, decisions rarely feel as heavy as they later become. And that is where the lesson stays. Because sometimes, the greatest battles are not fought in the open, but in the quiet moments, when no one is watching. If this story made you think, share your thoughts below. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe.